Yeah, it was, and we studied Mr. Biscaglia.
I Leo Biscaglia came here to teach from USC about probably 1973, that era. And so some of us got to know him quite well. And all of his books, yes, I made you read the books. But the amazing thing is that when Sharon Hennessy was being interviewed to be the superintendent here, she mentioned somehow that her educational experience had been influenced by Leo Biscaglia. And so I went up afterwards and I said, I think you and I are the same generation, that Winnie Tang and Mary Lee and a whole group of us were people who knew Leo Biscaglia. She said, you know Leo Biscaglia? And I said, yeah, we took him for dinner, we went on hikes together and so forth. And then, I don't know if you see that sometimes there are magnets that are really beautiful, and there's one that says how important a smile is, and it's done by Leo Biscaglia. And so I had bought one or two of those a year ago, and Orchid Club was having its book sale, and this man who was a grandfather who was back visiting said, oh, you have a Leo Biscaglia book here? And I said, yes, how do you know Leo Biscaglia? He said, oh, when I was growing up, he was one of my favorite authors. And that man's granddaughter is in my class last year as a senior. So for her senior year, I contacted Amazon and found a love book and gave her that little magnet. And so, yes, I think that Leo Biscaglia had a huge influence on many of us. I used lots of his ideas for the Journeys class, dealing with secret foods and all kinds of things like that. What were some other experiences that you had that you really enjoyed?
I think one of my favorite classes, because it was an elective, was I was in the 9th grade and I took tutorial what made me craft.
Yes.
And so for tutorial, we would go down to elementary school and we would have a student that we would tutor, but we didn't just tutor them. We then had to go back and keep a diary and with our reflections on it and everything. And so it made me feel very empowered. And I think also the fact that you had to write about it. And you could write, about your progress, about the time. I still remember Daryl. He didn't really learn to read very well. I tried.
That's really important. I'm glad they're recording this, I hope, because TS has a program like that now, where high school students can volunteer to go to the lower school, because we have a high percentage of our lower school students are learning English very seriously. As well as the modern times means that we have dysfunctional families, we have parents who are often not at home to take care of their children, but the almas are. And so sometimes the lower school teachers realize there are students in their classes that need tender loving care or special attention from an older student. And so I have a boy who's in my AP history class. He's bright and wonderful, but he's a little bit awkward around people. And I don't know, from the class of 72 is Betty Sun. Does anyone know Betty Sun? Yes, she's back here as a teacher.
Oh, she is?
Yes. So she's back here this year. She and Barbara Shaw helped us start Orchid Club in 1970. And so I talked to Betty and said, would you have any use? She teaches reading as a specialist that deals with all kinds of special needs. And so the result is that I asked her if she could use a boy to help one of her students. So James is helping two of her students. But I think your idea of making sure there's a journal is good. And I think that would really add more focus. So I hope that if they're recording this, it would say, in the olden days, they'd be very surprised to think, oh, you did those kinds of things? But we reinvent the wheel here. That this year, wellness is a big thing. And we had a wellness convention and all this. And I was moving to a new apartment after almost 40 years. And the amount of stuff I had accumulated was overwhelming. And I found in 1983, I was on a wellness committee. And so I took out this whole folder and I took it to the person in charge, and she said, TS was concerned about wellness before. I said, almost everything you're concerned about now, we were at one time. So the cycle comes around. What were some other choices?
Well, what influenced me very early on was Tom Cummings.
Yes.
But even before that, I think it was the summer of 1964, I went to the summer school and they had an Asian studies program. Okay, because in those days, this was the old Chang regime where everything was censored. And Fairbanks was considered a communist, right? But we got to read Fairbanks and have other information in that 1964 and 65. So I think although I remember Mrs. McGrath and all that, it was that summer school program.
And who
that I
taught
remember.
that? Do you remember?
It was taught by several people.
Okay.
I think it was a half-day program.
It was really exciting because I just think the interweaving of politics at TAS. In 1993, I had studied for a semester and I came back, and I asked ninth graders why they were here. And Dai Bingde, whose relatives had tried to assassinate Jiang Jingguo, explained why he was here. And then some of you know that I had Yo Mei Chiang in my class, who's Jiang Jingguo's granddaughter. And she had talked in my class about her grandfather nearly getting assassinated in New York. And so I just think these intersections of all these people on our campus all the time. Kathy Shu, who graduated from TAS and then went to Yale and then Columbia and then came back here to teach, her father and mother were on blacklists and he could not come back to his mother's funeral. And so, and yet Betty Sun's father was Chiang Kai-shek's main translator. And so when you think about all the interactions, that's why I just think a book would be amazing to deal with who are the people who have attended TAS. You know, it just it's overwhelming. And you think to have those people in the same class, you know. I don't think we do a very good job when it's political time because sometimes kids are afraid to party another party around certain classes. I think it's not right. What other kinds of things have you enjoyed? I think sports were so important. Mr. Drew, when you think about your favorite sports at TAS you were coaching, what were they?
All the sports were I think you want me to say a few words?
Yes, I'd love to have you say a few words, especially how you think you influence kids who probably would not have played those sports if you'd not been here.
I think anybody who's been a teacher or had any opportunity to teach recognizes that the student gives more to you than you give the student. What impressed me, I was just came from Vietnam. I tried to go back to the States and I couldn't. So I went to Asia and I ended up teaching. Howard Wire gave me a job. What impressed me, the first statement I made to any student was line up who's ever taller than you is on your right, so if they all lined up. And I said, who doesn't feel good about themselves, feels a little embarrassed, and close your eyes and raise your hand. And 9/10 of them raised their hand. That told you, at that age group in middle school, kids needed a lot of self-confidence. And that's what we emphasized. And by gosh, we gave them, as a former Marine, I had them doing all kinds of good things in the mud and the dirt. And we formed a rugby team out of these little guys. And somebody here said, well, I like to play rugby, but as a little guy. Nice thing about it was that there's 15 players on the field, and everybody participated. What's intriguing to me is that my daughter is a teacher, and then she gets phone calls home by parents who are not always happy with what's going on in the school. Here, not one parent ever called me, and they were dirty and filthy, and they emptied into the shower rooms.
It would be different now.
I don't think so, because this school was kind of unique. The other thing, by the way, was Wire never called me into the office, except for the day I took an extra day to go on a motorcycle trip way up into the mountains and we got lost.
I got called in a few times.
Did you?
I was late to school all the time because I had to come from Taipei on the buses. So I was continually getting called in by Wire, by cops, giving warning letters and all this kind of stuff. And then I was the first person who got the national merit.
It was an amazing man.
I thought I was going to be called in again to be reprimanded, and then they said, we have a letter for you.
The other thing was the guys I messed with here, moved around with, were the teachers. Every one of them was super committed. Their life, if you sat down at a dinner table for dinner, it was education. They talked about their students. So many of them, by the way, had no parents with them here. Just dropped off because their parents were working in Vietnam, or at that time it was also Cambodia. And they spent a lot of time I had a bachelor pad on the mountain, and a few of the soccer players would spend time up at my place because they had no place else to go, or they had a place to go and it was not fit to go. So they didn't have father images, and here's this, I was much slimmer, and I could work out with the guys. They spent a lot of time on the field, and sports was very important for the men. I have no knowledge of how the athletic department ran, but it was a great facility to be in, and most importantly to me personally was the other teachers here. They were a special group, and I say to myself, I wonder why I can't I have two daughters, they're big ladies now. I should have tried to get them into this school. End of story. Question?
I think you'll see, if you know Kathy Cutler, I hope you get a chance to see her today, because she's the dedicated kind of the teacher that Mr. Drew had just said, that Kathy's been here more than 35 years as a PE teacher, and she really loves kids, and she's just tremendous. She was waiting for you this morning, and I know she had to do an errand, and I don't know what her schedule is like, but you have to make sure you see Kathy Cutler.
What happened to Mrs. Golden? Mrs. Golden, she was the PE teacher a little before your time.
I have no idea. I went to other foreign countries after that with another agency, but I lost contact. This is the first communication I've had except for the one last year with you.
Any other kind of comments? Yes.
Yeah, I remember Mrs. Young.
Yes.
Yeah.
Who taught us how to art.
Yes.
What was special to me is that I painted my bedroom various colors, and I painted quite a few things on the walls. I had told Mrs. Young, and for my grade, she got me a pad, wrote all the comments on, walked into my bedroom, and gave me an A+. The long left hand son
Yes.
to give me a grade
And your husband was Bob.
Yes. And son Peter.
That's right.
Yes.
And had some children.
Any other kind of comments? This is a lovely sharing. Yes.
For Mr. Dew, Mr. Arthur Dew.
Okay.
Yes, and very strict, formal teacher, but not definitely all the way. But he became such good friends with my whole family, and like my brother, whenever he'd come back to Taiwan, would also always have lunch with Mr. Dew for years and years and years.
Maybe you could help a little bit then. In 1975, the school decided they were going to retire Mr. Du because he was 65.
A little louder, please.
Mr. Du was retired in 1965 because they said he was 65 in 1975. But they didn't tell him formally. What happened was that Mr. Du, I think, had seldom missed a day of school. But in the spring of 1975, he was walking where there was construction and he got hit by a board. And so he missed 2 or 3 days of school, and the substitute teacher said to the kids, I might be your teacher next year or something. Mr. Du is retiring. So Mr. Du came back, the kids said, you're retiring? And he said, no. He had just gotten one of the highest scores ever in the National Teachers Exam in America because he'd taken USC. And so he asked me to go in with him to the principal to ask what was happening. And so they said very directly to him, well, you're 65 and you should retire. And they didn't say how awkwardly to handle the whole thing. And so very luckily Mr. Du retired. But then he realized that there was at least 1 or 2 foreign teachers on the staff who were above 65. So that really hurt. I saw him probably every month and took him for dinners until he unfortunately couldn't live any longer. It was really, really sad. And so he died probably about 10 years ago. That I think that the influence he had on lots of people to be scientists and engineers was just overwhelming. But I ask you to say this because when they retired him, they tried to save face, and so they decided they would make an award called the Chinese American Friendship Award in honor of Arthur Du. And that would be presented at the graduation in 1975. And so the superintendent came to me and said, Dick, are you sure he's going to go? I said, I don't know. So he said, please make sure Mr. Du is going to be there for graduation. So I talked to Mr. Du and I said, you're going to be there? And he said, oh no, Dick, that's Dragon Boat Festival and I should be home with my family. He only had one brother here. And so I said, oh, but the kids love you so much, you should be at graduation. He said, no, I will not be there. And he did not go to the graduation to get that award. But what's happened is that for many, many years, and I have, I think, a program that goes maybe 1983 or 1983, 1984, it says the Chinese American Friendship Award, Arthur Du. But about more than 10 years ago, the Arthur Du part was removed. And so I went to say, could you make sure Arthur Du comes back on? And say that we don't know who Arthur Du is. So I explained who Arthur Du was. Then at that same time, Larry Cox passed away. And that's about 10 years ago. And so a group of us met to think there should be a Larry Cox Award because he was really a Renaissance man who influenced the world. And so it was secretaries and professionals, and we all got together, and we had a man who we thought was very innocuous as far as the administration would accept him to present the idea that we had a Larry Cox Award and we would sponsor it. We were told there are too many awards already, no. So the superintendent came and said, oh, Dick, you know what? We'll make the Chinese American Friendship Award the Larry Cox Award. I said, no, it's the Arthur Du Award. He said, but I don't know Arthur Du. I said, no, Arthur Du came in the 1960s and he left in 1975 and you wouldn't know him. He said, well, we're not going to change it. But through Helen's efforts, last year I took the program that said the Arthur Du Chinese American Friendship Award to the man in charge of awards, and I said, can it be taken back the way it used to be? And so I don't know what's happened. I saw him earlier in the year, and I said, it's really the Arthur Du Chinese American Friendship Award. Because if we don't have a history, we don't have a school, in my opinion. And so, and Arthur Du was so important at the school, just like Larry Cox was too. To give you an idea, I have a prejudice, so I can tell you that. I saw Helen Chen when she was about 8 years old. She came to a demonstration on the Suzuki method of violin.
Little bit louder.
Okay, I'm a little bit prejudiced because the first time I saw Helen, she was about 8 years old, and she came to a demonstration on how to do the Suzuki method of violin. And then I did teach her in 7th grade, and she got the first A+ I ever gave when she took my U.S. history class. To get an A+ in my class, Miss Dordoff would say, was quite a challenge.
I didn't do it.
She came very close. But the crucial thing is that she's brilliant. She went to Barnard and then she got her MBA in Turkey. She's fluent in Turkish. And she has more initiative and more love for the school than you could ever imagine.
That's correct.
And so I don't know what to say. I hope I'm being diplomatic. Yes.
Very diplomatic. It is important, though, for the school to understand that part of preserving the history of Taiwan, a lot of it is in this school. And my sisters and I are part of something called the Air America Cat Association. Holmes part of it, and that is people whose parents worked for Silver Transport Air America,
Yes.
CIA.
Yes.
And plane crashes here in Taipei and how that changed into China Airlines and the whole history behind all this
Yes.
stuff.
Yes.
And we have a very strong association that tries to preserve the history and tell the history as it relates to Taiwan.
Yes.
And even how it relates back to Bien Phu and the French and the Vietnam
Exactly.
War, and it's all very connected.
Yes.
And there are lots of people that went to this school. One of them is a good friend of mine, Steve Seabrist,
Yes.
whose grandson, related to son, got son through his mother, who our son, and he's one of our association members. But there's a whole long history of Taiwan in all of it. And it's really important to preserve that. And a lot of that, I think Helen understands, trying to keep just connections, people who can tell the stories and people can keep it alive. And
Here's the association, you have a website.
A little louder, please.
Yeah, no, I
Here's
don't
the
either way.
association.
it It's the Air America Association or the CAPS, the Civil Air Transport Association, they're actually together. I do the website.
The other website.
Oh, yeah. Your website.
Black bats and all of that is such an important
Yeah,
part
I
of
mean,
that.
all that is tied into it, but just important to, I just saw Hamilton and there's a song, who lives, who dies, who tells your story.
Yes, that's.
And it's really important to get the story.
And see, I think that it's really important that before people are gone, because you think there's a whole group of people that know all this,
Yes.
and it's immeasurable, and you think that it's just it's an oral history. Later on, people have to dig into it, and you have both sides, because there's so many different people represented right now. You can get every perspective, I think. And
It's important to have, I mean, our oldest pilot just turned 100 years old on March 19th. He used to live up in Sandu. We went to look for his house. And he later flew for Japan Airlines. I mean, he flew Korean War, he flew at Vietnam, he flew all these things. And of course, he went to Taipei and Sophie's with civil transport. And knows a lot of the stories of how the U.S. government was involved in the formation of Taiwan and how a lot of people at TNS were involved.
yes, very secretly. I think the other thing is that I don't know, the next time, if you come back, I hope you would go to the POW. Mr. Hurst is in charge of the POW organization here. It's an amazing effort. And Robert Hurst was just here this week and he filled this room with guests. But he's amazing. And you understand how Americans suffered here as prisoners of war. And so I just think that's a really important aspect also, because even in Taipei there were prisoner of war camps.
And it's another untold story.
Yes. And I think it has to be kept alive.
Yeah.
So I think I've gone over my time here.
I have one more thing to
Yes,
say.
yes.
The Journeys class and the Orphanage Club were very influential in my life too.
Oh, thank you. And mine too.
And then I think that in Journeys we learn to go outside our comfort zones and to see the world and to even know our country, because Taiwan's my country. And then in Orphanage Club we learn to help other people and to go outside our comfort zones again and to reach out. And I think that that's a really important thing to teach kids still.
Well, I do too. I just think Orphanage Club is still going strong. That we just, last Saturday we had a book sale and took in about 285,000 NT. That we had worked 6 Saturdays in the basement pricing books from 9 until 6 and categorizing them. And then we had good weather last Saturday, which was a miracle. And so we sold tons and tons of books. We packed up some that would go to the Philippines. We packed up some that would go to Bhutan. We threw away some that we got 600 NT for salvage. And then this week we've been really busy because we had Hunger Week. So when you came in this morning, you saw 2 big posters, I think. We raised money and raised awareness of hunger, and we took in about probably 30,000 NT. Yesterday we had a bowl sale. The art department made bowls, and you can buy a bowl, and that money goes to help the Salvation Army Soup Kitchen. And we had gone there last Thursday to make a video so people knew what the bowls were about. And now we're getting ready for the April. On my desk when I went this morning were emails about the April 7th Capital Babies album. So we're going strong still. So, yes.
Refresh my memory. Have you written a book about?
No, not.
Are you
Nothing
going
to
to?
say. No.
You can do that when they retire you.
No, I have. It should be John Dankowski and those important people who write the book.
I
So
don't know
then
about
I
that.
just feel so honored to see you again today. I'm just thrilled to see some of you. I just, wow, favorite, I can just remember when we were doing certain things together even. And so when I saw Eric Kaplan's name on the list, I just was so thrilled because I don't know if you know, the first day that Eric got ready to come to school, he got hit by a car as he got on the school bus. And so I knew about him before I ever saw him. And so I was so happy to see what he looked like today and know that he was
My dad, so did.
Yes. These 2 ladies' father impacted so many people's lives. I want to introduce you to a favorite student. That Kerry Lee is the young man sitting back there patiently thinking he always takes the class too long. That he had my first period class last year and I always went too long. And they're looking at their watches like this. We don't have any bells at TAS. And so the kids are very subtle, they go like this, and they go like this, and it's time to shut up. And so Kerry is a super good student, a very fine musician too, that he's just all around super. And his mom was president of PTA last year, and it was just a natural kind of thing that he would be the tour guide for you. And I turned you over to him with tremendous confidence. So I think, Gary, that Wednesday we would like to probably go down to the elevator. So I don't know, are you going to go on the fourth floor and how we can get possibly?
So thank you so much.
No, no,
Mr.
no,
Arnold.
Come back again and bring more people next time. You know, I'd love to see your sons and daughters and grandchildren.
Carol, my oldest did.
But one is with MIT.
Cindy went to MIT.
Yes. That's one of the first girls who gets to MIT. It's amazing. Yes.
Sons and daughters. This is my daughter, Carol.
Oh, you know, your grandmother was one of my favorite people. Yes. She was my secretary, and she was the most lovely lady. Did you ever meet your grandma?
Yes,
Okay.